thank you for this time and this place that you've created for us in this nation, Lord, to gather to consider the people's business, Lord. I just pray that you'll watch over us, guide, direct us in our decisions. Be with those today, Lord, that are in need of healing, Lord, and I just pray that you will give those families that are in need of comfort. I just pray that you will guide us and direct us and enlighten us in all things.
Thank you. So, roll call.
Curtis Brayley. Here. Buell Anglin.
Here.
Phil John Baker.
Here.
Jack Baker.
Here.
Harley Buzzard.
Here.
Julia Coates. Bradley Cobb. Bradley Cobb.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Joe Crittenden.
Here.
Jody Fishinghawk. Here. Janelle Fulbright. Don Garvin. Chuck Hoskin Jr.
Here.
Tina Corey Jordan. Curtis Snell.
Here.
Kara Cowan Watts.
Honey,
You're not on this email.
we have a quorum. The item on the agenda for the next couple of meetings is, as stated today, the redistricting plan. And Todd, do you want to just kind of give us a brief overview of redistricting? And I think you perhaps have a Supreme Court case that might lend some clarity.
Yes, the Supreme Court case. Let me first give that to you. It will be emailed to you. It's about 60 pages long, and I thought that would be too much of a waste of paper to copy that over and over again. So
you want us to use our ink?
yeah, just look on but the case is League of Latin American Citizens versus Perry. It is the latest case from the United States Supreme Court that really delved deep into districting and redistricting. This is the one, if you recall, in the late 90s, early 2000s. I can't exactly remember the year. I think it was early 2000. In the year 2000, the Texas legislature became Republican, and although it was mid-census year or census time, they wanted to redistrict immediately. And the purpose of wanting to redistrict at that time is that the Texas Republican legislature knew that if they had the votes to basically ensure not only their seats, but also to ensure or to realign and redraw what we call in some cases gerrymandering. A congressional district scheme that would have basically ensured that the Republican congressional delegation would be Republican. Big fight goes up to the Supreme Court, as you may recall, that a number of Texas Democrat legislatures were held up in the Holiday Inn in Ardmore for quite some time because there was an attempt to force a quorum to bring up this action, and if they're outside the jurisdiction of the Texas Rangers, well, they couldn't be forced to attend. But at any rate, that's an aside. This case will be emailed to you. It is lengthy and it is in depth, but it does give a good history of redistricting. What I would want to do today, and speaking with Secretary Knight, is kind of take a step back and look at the general picture of why we have districts, and if we're going to redistrict, what do we want to achieve, and what priorities do we want to set to make sure that the representation is fair, equitable, and most of all amenable to the public. I'm sure as you all will recall, when the Cherokee Nation was reformed or resurrected in 1976 under the 1976 Constitution, there was 15 tribal council members, and the Constitution was silent as to how that council would be selected. So they were elected at large, which meant you ran throughout the 14 county district and the absentees. and you it literally ran on a slate, and it was, number one, very expensive for a candidate to do that. If you're living in South Adair County, to marshal enough assets to campaign in Nowata, in Tulsa, and Craig County, and in many cases a trip out to California, New Mexico, and Texas to run for a council seat. And also, it was determined later that it really wasn't a fair representation of the Cherokee people. It would be hard for a candidate, or for a candidate to meet the needs of all the Cherokee people throughout the whole jurisdictional boundaries, and it would be hard for a constituent to know who to go to. This system changed. What year did it change? 89. And then it was broke up into 2 districts, and there were several, in some cases, like we have today, 2 counselors per district. I think Cherokee had three counselors at that time, and according to our Constitution, after that we reapportioned, and the numbers changed variably from there. So right now we have a system of districts, and it is now time that we visit this issue again, and and try to determine what it is that we want to achieve. One thing that I think is most important in any election law amendment is, you ask the first question is, well, is this going to be good for the people? Is it going to be good for the constituents? You want election laws to be simple, you want them to be fair, and you want them to encourage voter participation or voter involvement. And we need to develop a system of districting, if it's the body, if it's the will of this body, that is going to be simple, that is going to be fair, and that is and would encourage everyone to be active. It has been proposed last term and in this term in various ways of having 15 separate districts. It is also being proposed that you have 5 districts with 3 counselors each. This is, as we've talked in the subcommittee before, this is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We have to settle this problem before we really get into getting the rest of the amendments done, and the rest of the amendments will happen, I think, fairly quickly, because the election's close at hand. We will soon have a new election commission seated, and I think it's going to that part will go fast. So, with that in mind, two maps have been passed out to you. One map with the kind of the pastel colors is one that was generated on behalf of Councilman Garvin, which has another proposal for 15 separate districts. The other one with the brighter pictures or brighter colors is a map that was almost passed last term. Now, I don't have the 5 district 3 councilors map. Do you have that, Melanie? We just might make a quick copy of this also.
Did you pass around the rest?
Yeah, I don't have
Yeah.
All I really have is this from the last meeting. That's one of the one I have.
Well, we're going to have copies made of the 5 districts, 3 counselor map also. So somewhere between what we started with and what we have here, we need to make a determination of what to do. Now, I guess one thing that I would like to get straight or get my arms around this is, do we want 15 separate seats? Now, if we make a determination if we want 15 separate seats, then we have to go about the task of lining out those districts to make it, number one, fair, get it as close to equitably the same number of people as reasonably possible. It doesn't have to be exact, but reasonably possible. And make it to a district to which constituents can understand, they're familiar with, won't be confusing to the constituents, which it would in turn make it, I would believe, encourage voter participation. So fairness, simplicity, and encourage the political involvement of the people. So this is a subcommittee. This is a working group. It's where we talk across the table. I'm just going to throw it out there. How many people want to have 15 separate districts? How many people want it to stay the same? How many people think we need to have less districts with more counselors?
Perhaps they don't want to make that decision until we see the other map.
Oh, no. And like I said, no decisions to be made. I didn't want to say, hey, we're making a decision here, but just kind of get where people are where people are at in that respect. And while those copies are being made, like I said, I've made some general statements here.
He's got the floor right now. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that concludes my opening remarks on this. If you want to hear from Ms. Secretary Knight, or I yield to any questions that the body may have.
Ms. Watts, do you have a question for
If,
Todd?
if Melanie is going to be next, then I think we need, in order to continue moving forward, I think we have to have an idea of what the principles of redistricting are, where this body wants to go with it.
Yeah, I
think
think
that's
that's
what
the
Melanie-
objective here. Melanie, did you want to come forward? Mr. Soap?
Yes, I would just like to officially request to be a member of this subcommittee.
That's
Let's
fine.
accept.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion on Mr. Soap becoming a member of this committee? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. You are now a member. Melanie?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We over in the executive have also been discussing districting and what might be some things that we would look at in terms of that it would be good to achieve. First of all, obviously, it's a constitutional requirement, and we know what the Constitution says with regard to districting, a reasonable equal division of citizenship among the districts. The other thing that Todd mentioned is voter understanding, and I think that that's something we've also discussed. How easy is it for the voters to have access to our electoral process? How well do they understand what district they're in and where the boundaries are? And how do they register in those districts? Participation in the electoral process, and Todd also mentioned this. How does it lend itself to voter participation? Is it going to increase voter participation? Is it going to increase candidate participation? That's also something that we should probably talk about is participation from both the voter and the candidate perspective. We've also discussed how well, because as Todd mentioned, the at-large, at-home in the 14 counties did not do a good job. I think everyone agrees, did not do a good job at representing the community interests. In other words, if we had 15 counselors, all from Tahlequah, and I live south of Tahlequah, but if we all came from one town, then how well would the community interests be represented? And so that's something to consider. How well will a districting plan represent the interests of particular communities, of particular regions within the Cherokee Nation, and then also how will it represent the national interest of the Cherokee Nation? And so keeping all of that in mind, because there's a balance there. Sometimes the national interest doesn't necessarily coincide with individual interests from constituents. And so there's a balance between what's good for the nation now and years into the future, and what's good for a particular constituent at a particular point in time. And so all of those things you all, those are hard questions to answer, and I'm not necessarily offering an answer, but just things to consider when we look at districting plans. Other thing that we've discussed, you all discussed in your subcommittees and your committees at the last time that we talked about districting, and it's been discussed some this time, is the data set that we use. It's pretty important which data set we use, whether it's registration data, whether it's proportionment data, and if there's questions about that, David's here to answer those as to pros and cons of each, because no data set will be perfect. And then the other thing is cooperation among elected officials. You know, obviously, this body acts as one body. Our government acts as a government. What promotes coordination and alignment of interests among this body, between the branches of government, and so forth, when the nation acts on issues? And so how representation plays into that. It does play a role into how well we work together. So those are just some ideas that I'd like to put forward for your consideration, and I'm sure you all have your own ideas about what's important in terms of considering a districting plan. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Did anyone have any questions or comments, Melanie or Todd? Yes.
I thought there was a list of principles that we were going to discuss and possibly move on.
I have that list that I just sort of went on through. I have that here. Yes, please.
These maps that were handed out here, are those the ones that you had copied for us, Melanie?
Yes, that's fine.
Uh-huh. These are maps that we should consider in redistricting, or?
Those are, Todd mentioned some examples of, rather than 15 districts, if there were 5 districts, what would that look like? And that's what that set is in front of you, is some options for 5 out of district.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Thornton?
Madam Chair, after looking at this 5 districting, I would like to ask to be a member of this committee.
Yes.
Move to accept.
Do I have a second to accept Mr. Thornton?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor,
What's the
signify by
motion?
saying. Mr. Thornton would like to be a member of this committee.
Okay.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
You bet. And, yes, Mr. Baker?
This last one, 5 district example. Who's going to speak to that one?
Melanie, are you speaking to the 5 district example?
I can, and if there are detailed data questions, David's here as well.
Okay. So we will, the group that was just handed to you, the 5 district plan, Melanie, would you come forward and speak to that, please?
In the green, it's got Harley, Curtis, Joe, and Jody. Is that a 3-member district?
Any of the 5 district examples would end up being 3-member districts.
Gotcha.
Now, how those are implemented, you know, as in the other maps that you've looked at, sometimes the residency of the current office holder doesn't always coincide with the districting proposal. So in that case, it would not.
Anything specifically, Ms. Counwatts?
Well, we got the, I don't know if they've been passed around. Does everybody have the principles? Would it be appropriate, Madam Chair or Madam Speaker, if we adopted these principles? Because I know I agree with all of them, and maybe that we need a foundation to move forward.
This is the first time I've seen them. You want to take time to read them and review them and possibly bring them back next time?
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. So it'll be on the agenda at next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Counwatts. Yes, Mel, we're ready for you.
I'll just go through these briefly, and then if there are any questions about any of them. The first 2 are organized by county, as you can see, which just grouping counties together in the best way to achieve the least discrepancy between districts. So both of them are 5 district examples, but they're a little different in the grouping of counties. The thought being is the attempt to try to group counties that have similar interests and history. The third map, the third through the fifth map, are groupings by zip codes. So you'll notice that those are a little less easy to read, but they are grouped by zip code, so the assumption being that a citizen typically knows what their zip code is. But it makes for some more unusual kinds of territory there to try to figure out, as with any zip code option. So it's just examples, and you can see the deviation on each of them that shows this is the deviation from the optimal population in each district. The optimal being 23,262 citizens.
Melanie, are you finished? You want us to open it up for questions? Does anyone have any questions of Ms. Knight? Or we probably need time to think about these. It's not. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you. And not to confuse anyone or to rush you along, but Mr. Garvin, and did you want to bring forth this proposed? We probably need to label these Exhibit A, B, and C. District 5 districts would be Exhibit A, and Mr. Garvin's and Kara's would be Exhibit B, and then the old proposal would be Exhibit C. Okay, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
We've been working with this for almost a year, I guess, some of us, and it's not easy, I can tell you that right now. And I want to thank Mr. Justice, David Justice, for all his work. He's been putting in a lot of long hours and getting lots of headaches, and he's done this over and over and over, and I keep telling him we got to do something else, and he agrees with it and tries, but we're trying to strive for one man, one vote, and right now you know that a lot of districts have one man, two votes, and how that ever got started out, it's good if you live in those districts, you get to vote twice. When they pass out the whiskey, well, you get two drinks instead of one. That's the way they used to campaign. I don't think they do that anymore. But anyway, right now, according to the population, Three Rivers and Rogers needs to gain one seat. Adair and Mays has to lose one seat. And nobody wants to lose a seat, I know that. And, the problem is, trying to be fair, you say, well, that's not bad, but if you look at the road money and the education money, I'll take that back. The education money is divided out fairly. The roads money is not. It should be divided 9 ways instead of 15 ways. Now, if Mays County loses a seat and Adair loses a seat, Three Rivers gains one and Rogers gains one, if we go by the way the court did it the last time. The simple answer might be to give the Three Rivers District a weighted vote and the Rogers County a weighted vote. Give us 2 votes and it'd all be even. Three Rivers has 2 votes, Rogers County has 2 votes. Everybody else stays the same. That would equalize it out. But I don't know where that's going to go. Right now we have, I told David to make us a map that had 15 districts and everybody has a seat. Nobody got left out. And some of the people says, well, I like that other one better. But on that other one person got left out. And Meredith or Chris, one would be left out. That's a no-no. We don't want to leave anyone out. I don't.
I might be moving anyway, Don.
Oh, where you gonna move
I
to?
don't know.
Now, you know, Mr. Justice not gonna like to hear that. Anyway, it's complicated, and we almost had this done last time, and one vote changed on us. I was talking to David a while ago, I said, we almost had it. But anyway, you gotta have 12 votes to do any good, in my opinion. I don't think 11's gonna be worth a hoot. You just whistling Dixie. So, with that being said, I think we need to be fair, and as far as trying to postpone this, and I know Councilman Hoskin wanted to postpone it a couple of months, and Councilman Jordan wanted to have some community meetings, and somebody wanted to help the poorest of the poor, and I don't know what all we talked about, but right now, I'm just putting this out, and if you want to change it, call the attorney. Don't call me, because I had a whole deal. I'd like to turn it over to Todd to finish it up.
Mr. Garvin,
This needs a little icing on the cake, so I'm thinking.
just one moment. Mr. Hoskin had a question.
Well, one of them is going to be directed to Todd, but he may cover it, but just let the record reflect, I wanted to postpone action, not discussion.
I thought maybe you was coming up with your own plan.
Cooey scooey, big, huge, massive district.
I've got a question on this man.
Mr. Todd, excuse me just a moment. Mr. Thornton has a question on this last map.
On B map?
On Exhibit B.
Yeah, I think that's one. There's just above Sequoia. There's an area in white.
Camp Gerber, no one lives there, a bunch of deer. And
No. There's somebody lives there, I guarantee you, I bet you them. But is that included in District 7, or is that no man's land?
It's no man's land. I guess squatters could go in there and take it.
That is part of Cherokee County, I would assume, or for the most part, isn't it?
No, some of it's
Yeah.
But but yeah, I would say,
That I can see it's Cherokee.
I would, I mean, it's gotta be somewhere, and you'd just be.
David will tell us
District
he's the
1.
map man.
It'd be in District 1.
That is actually Cherokee Game Refuge. It's state-owned land. There's only one house with 2 individuals living on that entire piece of property, so.
Okay. Thank you. But what's it include? Nothing? Is that a no-vote area? Is that?
We can add it if we want to add it to the land base, but whoever is getting District 1, which right now is Councilman Jordan,
Would have that?
she's going to get a lot more credit for a lot more land area.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Calwas and Dr. Cobb and then Tina.
Thank you. I think this, don't sit down too, David. This on Exhibit B, or which is also Dawn's map, is that by zip code, or how was those lines drawn?
Well, partially by zip code, partially by county boundaries, road boundaries, really any kind of natural or man-made distinctive boundary that I could find to use the boundaries. I started to look at county roads.
So it might be more difficult for voters.
Oh, definitely. And if we start looking at county roads, there's, gosh, millions of ways that I could split them up, so.
Okay.
I was just trying to use the largest features that I could in the area.
Understood. We've asked you to do something very difficult. Thank you.
And Dr. Cobb?
I would like to have some discussion by the attorneys in the room. What, are we opening ourselves up to anything by not including Camp Gruber? By just saying, well, this is this big chunk of land within the Cherokee Nation, but we are consciously saying that we don't have any jurisdiction over something obviously within our jurisdiction?
I by all means would include it in some district. I mean, and it's, you know, it would naturally go into under map B. It would go under Cherokee County. I know in map C. May I take that? in map C, which is the one that we considered last year, it is considered, would be part of District 3. So, yeah, I mean, I think it should be considered in the land base, whether anybody lives there or not. You know, there's not, you know, there are plenty of areas that people don't live a lot in, but they should be part of the jurisdiction. I don't have the floor, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Jordan.
David, did you come back up? Yes. Where Meredith kind of bends around and comes back in, am I in her district?
No, it's actually where we have your current location. It is actually inside the district number 1. It just happens to be really close.
Okay, where do you think that little jog stopped at? Do you recall?
That is a zip code. That is the zip code for Fort Gibson, which is off the top of your 3. Yeah.
I'll take it if you want the top end of the other part. I'll try to even you up here.
There's more commonality between the top part and Mays County and...
I would think there is.
Mr.
It
Embry?
doesn't matter to me, and I'll take that little white spot too. There's a lot of deer down there.
And one thing,
For all of them.
You don't have to worry about campaigning, do you?
I think I know the two people he's talking about down there.
One sign, do it all.
Mr. Embry?
in all these maps, you know, on all of them, we have, not map C, but on maps A and B, you have little notations or stars indicating where the present council person resides. Now, there's a lot of things to consider when you're developing your districts, and we've touched on them. You know, number one, simplicity, fairness, increase voter participation. But one thing that shouldn't be considered is the residence of the seating council person. You know, we don't want to create a district for someone or make it easy for someone to get elected. We want it to create a district to be fair and to be, you know, simple for the voters to understand. Those are the top, criteria, you know, and I know sometimes that's hard to, you know, to get around because we just naturally think that, and that's not a bad thing. But remember, if that is a priority, make it one of the least priorities that you have. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Mr. Embry. Ms. Cal Watts?
Thank you. Is the data that they're discussing in, like, you know, dealing off individuals and such, is that data that's been proportioned according to what we think might be there, according to a population size, or is that actual we're able to put that in and map that home?
No, we were not able to geocode homes for all 14 county areas.
So that would probably be inappropriate to try to divvy up portions. I mean, or it'd be less accurate. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
The data that was used to create this map was it was based off the zip code data, but it was also a portion of that zip code in land base. So
Thank you.
Mr. Hoskin?
Yeah, this question's for Mr. Embry. I know the federal courts have had occasion to rule on, you know, was a particular district constitutional, and one of the things they look at is the deviation from the optimal district. And there's as I read it, there's various standards out there. If they're talking about congressional districts, they apply a more strict standard. And if it's legislative districts within the state, as I read it, they're applying a little bit more loose standard. And I just wonder if the deviations we're looking at here, and we're obviously not bound by the federal court decisions, but do they fall within what, if this was if we're a state legislature and we're divvying up state legislative seats, or do these numbers comport with what the courts have said is equal protection under the United States Constitution?
You're right as to, when you get to state legislatures, dividing up districts, county commissioners' districts, etc., there's a much less loose standard as it would be as to a House and Congress. what we have, the key words that we have to focus on, and, it is a subjective standard. It says 15, our Constitution says 15 of these seats shall be apportioned to afford a reasonably equal division of citizenships among the districts, okay? Reasonably equal. How close is that? I felt confident that the plan that was almost passed last year would have met that standard. And I think there are some, there are others in here that would also meet that standard. You just, what is a reasonable division to be equal? That's.
And just to follow up, and so the plans that you've seen, well, Councilor Garvin's plan, for example, it falls within what you say would meet the constitutional standards. I know we don't have a lot of guidance in this area other than what the Constitution says, but.
And I would want to study that a little bit more. I mean, I've only got to see that this morning.
Right.
So, but on the, at the first glance of it, yeah, it would, it would fall within that standard, because we're not going to get equal, and we're not going to get within 4 or 5 people,
If I could, the plan that was passed last time was vetoed by the chief. That plan's numbers, did you feel like, were we operating under, are we apples and oranges here? Were we operating on that same constitutional standard?
Same constitutional standard.
And so in your view, that one met?
Absolutely.
Okay.
He may disagree with me, but.
And I think and I agree with you, but I think he disagreed in his veto message.
Well,
There seemed to be 2 things. One, it was not timely, and 2, it didn't meet what he considered to be essentially one person, one vote. But we don't have much guidance in this area. We look to the federal courts to see what they would say in a similar situation.
I would have no problem defending that before our courts, because I think it did meet the reasonably equal division standard that's set forth in our Constitution. And what I like is, what I think one thing that, and this is something that Mr. Garvin has said over and over again, and I agree with him. One man, one vote. One person, one vote, excuse me. And the way you achieve that is by 15 separate districts. And by districts, you have, as being a representative of a specific district, you have a specific constituency that you need to answer to. And that doesn't mean you're going to check the will of, that doesn't mean that you're going to check the good of the nation at the door just to make sure you get your fair share of the community buildings in your district. That's why you're elected as, number one, a counselor for the Cherokee Nation. But I think if each counselor has a specific district, a specific area of which you are a resident, and those people know you, I think it would be a better form of government if you had 15 districts. But that's just my personal opinion.
Just one final follow-up. And when whatever plan we pass, I mean, it seems to me it's important that we pass the plan and we be clear in our legislative record what it is that led us to this plan. You talked about, we're not trying to preserve incumbency here, and I agree with that, but I think it also brings to mind that we do need to delineate the reasons we got there. And I think it's important because, at least the federal court cases I've looked at, they've gone back and looked at the legislative record. They said, did the legislative body really mean what they said when they drew these districts, when there's this constitutional review, which there may be. So one thing I'd ask, Madam Speaker, is when we do get to that point, we talked about those principles, that we do pretty clearly adopt some principles, or at least lay them out what led us to this decision. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
A good point. Mr. Baker?
And you do the one man, one vote, and, even though we've staggered terms, there's an opportunity here to get the people engaged where they could vote every 2 years and stay more involved within their government if we were to choose a 5 3-seat districts. And I know it's not one man, one vote. I know it's not a district that is just specific to exactly where you live and all that. But I think for the most part, this body is, whether you're from Sequoyah County, your district is concerned about what's going on at Nowata, and just as apt to vote for the No Water Clinic as somebody from No Water to the Muskogee Clinic. If it's good for the Cherokee people, it's good for the nation, and it's good for us. So we might want to lean toward the 5 districts where 3 people represent each district, and that way our constituents get a voice every 2 years, doing it that way. The other thing is, David, on coming up with these numbers, you kind of zip coded and proportioned, and you've done several different methods. Is this any better than what you did a year ago?
This is basically the same thing we did a year ago. It is.
All you did was carve up that one district down from.
Yeah, it's using the same method, the land, or it's what I've been calling the land-based method, where.
And see, I can't go. I mean, there is no way where one council person ought to have to run in 4 different counties. That's, I mean, Cherokees from Cherokee County have an identity. Mays County have an identity. Delaware County have an identity. Adair County have an identity, and to have somebody run from any one of those 4 counties, I mean, I thought that's kind of what we did when we did the at-large, and kind of got that muddied area, out of there. And but I mean, if you're from Cherokee County, everybody, you go to now one of 3 high schools. Everybody pays their taxes in the same place. Everything's your whole life revolves around Cherokee County if you're from Cherokee County. And I think it's pretty much the same in Adair County and Mays and Delaware and Sequoia, and so to start gerrymandering it where you're running in 2 or 3 counties or 4, I don't think it's good for the people and for their perception of their nation. Thank you.
Ms. Hembry, do you want to respond to that?
Oh, not to I want to make a comment about this map. It's not in response, but.
Okay. Mr. Soap?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment that to a certain extent, I believe that there is one man, one vote. I have only one vote and one representation, on this council. And, it's, I think you have to applaud the councilors in the past and maybe in the future that have to represent a group of people on a singular basis. And, I just think that that's what we should focus on and be trying to determine versus looking at, the various maps, is to how do we want to represent the people? Do we want to represent them as one person, as only one person, or as potentially as a group of individuals, whether it be 3 or whether it be 2, whatnot? Because I know after the election, I had conversations with a lot of the constituents, and even though that we advertised and educated people on the system, they were quite surprised that they were only able to vote for one person per seat. And so even though, say, Mays County, for example, you had 2 votes, like Don was saying, seat 1 and 2, they still didn't like the idea that they were segregated like that, in a sense that they didn't have the option to cast 2 votes. So, moving forward, as you go to these districts that have had that representation, I think you just have to take that into consideration. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Fulbright.
Well, I'm sort of confused here. I've got a question for David, I guess. How do we determine where these people are actually living? Is that by tribal citizenship or voter registration?
It's based
on
registration database.
Okay. And then my other thought was, we had so many problems with election commission. How are we going to educate all these people that that they've got to re-register, that we're changing them. It's hard enough to get them trained up to vote in one county, I mean, where they're supposed to go. I mean, are we gonna notify all these people we're sort of a roaming society, everybody moves, you know? I mean, just, that's my only comment. I like the old way better that was rejected last year, but I just don't see this 5 districts with 3 in each one, but I'm agreeable to whatever we agree on. Good point, it's complicated. That's all I've got to say. Todd, did you want to comment?
In response to that is that the implementation of this act, whatever you pass, is probably going to need to be in 2011. You all were elected to 4- and 6-year terms, etc., and there's going to be a we can't legally interfere with your terms. Okay. Also, when you're talking about educating people, whatever we pass, and that's what I would want you all to pass something relatively, quick in this term, is because everyone's going to need to re-register. I mean, you're going to need to register, in my opinion, unless someone can think of another way around it, because you're going to have to register in a district, possibly a different district. District 1 through 15, or districts 1 through 5. Unless you just keep it the same. Unless you just keep it the same. So that's something to consider. But that's something, and that's not going to be an easy task. Implementing this thing even in 2011, we think of it as some year way far down the road. It's not, and especially when you're thinking about the possibility of re-registering everybody, in the Cherokee Nation.
Thank you, Todd. Mr. Garvin?
I was just going to comment on what Councilman said about one vote. He mentioned he has one vote, and I think your partner down there has one too. So 1 and 1 makes 2 votes in Mays County. If we vote today, Mays County will have 2 votes. Three Rivers District's going to have 1. So. And I've got a lot more people in my district. In fact, I'm the 2nd largest in the whole. Cherokee County has more than 3 Rivers. So that's what I'm talking about, 1 man, 1 vote instead of 2-1. Kind of get this off the high center, I'm going to make a motion that we have 15 districts.
Second. Moved in second. Any further discussion? All in, Mr. Baker.
Move the table until we determine what those 15 districts are.
Move to table. Mr. Embry?
I think what, if I'm catching Councilman Garvin's drift here, is...
You're not speaking to tabling, are you?
Well, I'm trying to explain the vote, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Okay, which I think you want a consensus of, do we have 15 districts? Not saying what those districts are going to be, but do we want 15 districts, period. And I guess that was my understanding.
Motion to table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Yes, we're not going to table. Okay, now there was a motion to, would you restate your motion, Mr. Garvin?
I make a motion that we divide the Cherokee Nation up into 15 almost equal districts, and that to be determined by the work of the committee the next 2 or 3 months, or however how long it takes us. Todd's pretty fast. I don't think it'll take that long.
So the motion is to designate 15, not designate, but to ensure 15 districts.
Carve out 15 districts in the Cherokee Nation.
Minimum 5. Minimum 5.
Okay.
That's a lame.
Do I have-
And I seconded.
Okay. Any
So it's the
discussion?
principle.
Yeah.
Mr. Henry, you got discussion on that?
No. I'm not to discuss it, but I mean, it's 15 regionally equally divided districts.
Mr. Baker.
Okay, so if we vote on this 15 districts, that means that we're not going to come back and say that there's going to be 5 districts. There's going to be 15.
Well, if we vote,
I understand
it'll be
that.
15.
This is point of clarification. That's where I'm at. So that if we vote for 15 districts, then there ain't gonna be no 3 districts or five districts of 3 or anything. It's gonna be 15 carved out districts, and at this point, no guarantees of county lines, no guarantees of where people are used to voting or anything. So, okay.
Mr. Hoskin?
Madam Speaker, if we go down the road of 15 districts and reach such a level of frustration and disagreement that we can't, I mean, we certainly have the power to revisit other numbers. I know this is a significant vote because it guides us, but I just don't want to misunderstand it. I mean, it's not as if we could never go back down another path again. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it. Would you, Mr. Garvin?
I certainly would.
Okay. Everyone clear? He's trying to ensure with his motion that we have 15 districts. Mr. Hoskin's comment was that that's not going to stagnate us at 15. If we want to come back later and revisit it, we can. Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay.
Bill John Meredith and who?
Mr. Soap. Okay, any further discussion today on redistricting?
I had one.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Fisher.
So whatever we adopt, is it back to their zero number of registered voters?
Yeah, well, what's going to need to happen is that you all have set a principle now that we're going to divide up districts, okay, into 15 separate districts. Whatever plan that this body eventually arrives at, you know, I am a citizen of Tahlequah. Right now, I vote in District 1, and I go and I vote for C A and CB. But I'm going to have to go and I'm going to have to register in districts maybe 1, 2, or 3. I don't know exactly where that line will fall. But I can't foresee an option that's not going to require Cherokee voters to re-register for a particular district. And I might be wrong. I'm not the smartest person in this room, but I mean that's. I guarantee you that.
Dr. Cobb?
I guarantee you I'm not the smartest person in this room. But I'm going to tell you, this, and you may just keep standing up. This may not be
I feel like I'm at a Catholic church.
I understand. Up and down.
I'm Catholic, I can say that.
I don't know if I'm looking for an answer, but I've thrown this out several times, and quite honestly, I'm getting a little jazzed about it. I feel like it's just being swept under the table. But I was extremely unhappy with the time or lack thereof that some of these people that lived outside of the districts had to register. And I can tell you, Osage County, and I'm quite sure there were some in Coffeyville, Kansas. I know Councilor Hoskin and Buell and I have talked about this extensively. I've never gotten a really good answer on why they had, like, I don't even know what it was. I mean, 2 months, and by the time we found out about it, we had 6-7 weeks to get all these massive amount of people. And to this day, I still have people in Osage County that are like, I never got anything. I didn't know about it. How come nobody? I mean, I really have a problem with this.
And well, you should. I mean, and because it happened in a very short timeline, and a lot of factors came in, to create that. Can we redo that? I don't know. That was that's a constitutional.
And that's where I'm going with this. Since we've got to re-register, I mean, I want that explored.
We will look into that possibility. But the main factor of why that happened the way it did was that this decision that implemented the 1999 Constitution didn't come down till June of 2006. Okay. And that left us with a pretty short timeline to implement just the basics of what we needed to implement, and gave the Election Commission even a shorter time frame to try to get the word out to those people. Can we revisit that? I would like to. And we'll look into it. With Secretary Knight and Attorney General Hammond, if we can reopen those books, I'd be all happy for it. But I don't know if we can, given the very explicit language of the Constitution, and and Mr. Baker will recall that was one of the toughest sections of the Constitution to create, and a lot of, just on a personal note, a lot of that was in that section should have never been in that section, in my opinion. But,
Well, I would like for it to, the possibility that it could be explored, at least be looked at. Something from the standpoint, you've already made the comment that was in the Constitution, it was a big deal. Something that big needs a lot more time for a registered citizen to take a look at. So if it's at all possible to explore that, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cobb. Mr. Hoskin, then Ms. Fulbright, and then Jack Baker, then we need to adjourn so he can start his resource meeting.
Just a couple of things. One is on the at-large issue and registering inside a district. I mean, I'm concerned that the Constitution only gave us one bite at the apple. We took it. It didn't do a very good job. And absent, I mean, we need to explore this, but my thought is absent a court saying it was unconstitutional because it didn't give folks enough time, reasonable enough time. Absent that, I mean, I don't know if we can do it. I'd like to see us do it. I don't know if we can, but certainly something we need to explore. But those are some things that I would keep in mind. The other thing is, Mr. Henry, are you sure that they'll have to re-register? Do they do that when they reapportion state legislative seats? And number two, if we do have to re-register, aren't we really, isn't it almost a wholesale disenfranchisement of people, and then creating this maybe unnecessary burden of having to re-register, and maybe that opens us up to some, challenges. I don't know.
like I said, I'm not the smartest person in the room. Maybe but maybe it can be effectuated by. I getting a letter from the election commission saying, congratulations, Mr. Hembry, you're in District 2. Maybe that works, or I'm in District 3. I don't know. Like I said, if we can avoid that, by all means, let's do it. But any options?
I mean, it does seem to me that the election commission could send something to the address on file. And if that address on file is within a new district, they could just say, because I think you're registering to take hold of your franchise, not necessarily what district you're in. And so I'd rather see us do that.
Well, we're way premature, but if there's any way we can do that, I mean...
I just don't want that. I just don't want that uncertainty to cause us to be hesitant when we're drawing these district lines. That are we really creating this burden? Because maybe there's no barrier at all. Maybe it's fairly seamless, just an administrative matter. Thank you for mentioning.
Ms. Fulbright, and then Mr. Baker.
Well, my comment is very similar to what Mr. Hoskins made, because Sequoia County seems to rearrange our little voting precincts all the time, and nobody has to re-register. They just send you a little postcard and says, oh, you're going to vote at Rocky Point now, and you used to vote over at Belfont. And you don't have to re-register. They just notify you that you are going to be voting at a different place. So I think his comments were kind of what I was thinking. I don't think everybody would have to re-register, because that would be a terrible burden. If you know how much trouble it is to get somebody to register in the first place, you don't want to go out and try to re-register all of them. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Baker?
My comments are very similar. The Constitution says that if you live within the 14-county area, then you're required to vote in the district in which you reside. So it's simply a matter of educating the voters of which new district they will be in. And I think it's simply sending out a card, as Mr. Hoskin said, would work fine. That's all. Thank you.
Well, I would be afraid if we made everybody re-register, our numbers are going to go way down. We won't hardly have anybody coming to the polls, because it's just like everything else. The word won't get out, and nobody will re-register, and you'll have, instead of 1,000 people, you may have 100 people. And that somehow, it seems very simple to me. They look at your physical address, see where you fall in whatever map we adopt, and as Jack said, send them a little card. I got a little card from the state the other day that I can get moved from one place to another place based on my physical address. So they really don't have a hard time with it.
I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved in second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Smartest person in the room within 30 minutes down to the solution.